If your cucumber plants always start out looking healthy but then slow down, turn yellow, drop flowers, or give you only a handful of small bitter cucumbers, chances are you are making one mistake long before the first seed ever goes into the ground.
I see people spending money on expensive fertilizers, fancy seeds, and bottles with colorful labels every spring, yet they keep getting the same disappointing harvest year after year. The truth is that cucumbers are not difficult to grow, but they punish small mistakes much faster than most vegetables. I learned that many years ago after wasting an entire season doing exactly what everyone around me was doing. I believed that buying better products would solve the problem, but it never did. Everything changed when an old gardener looked at my garden for just a few minutes and smiled. He said, "You are trying to feed the plant before you have prepared a home for it." At first, I did not understand what he meant, but after following his advice, my cucumber plants became stronger than I had ever seen before. They stayed healthy longer, they produced more fruit, and they kept going long after my neighbors had already pulled their plants out. Since then, I have followed the same simple routine every season because it works without costing me much money. Today, I want to show you exactly how I prepare everything before planting, because this is where the biggest difference is made. Most people think success begins with the seed packet, but it actually begins with the soil that seed will live in for months. Healthy soil gives you healthy roots. Healthy roots give you healthy vines, and healthy vines reward you with baskets full of cucumbers instead of excuses. There are a few simple things that almost nobody does anymore because they seem too ordinary to matter. Yet these forgotten habits have helped gardeners grow beautiful crops for generations. None of them require expensive chemicals or complicated equipment. Most of them use things you probably already have at home. As we go through each step, I will explain not only what I do, but also why it makes such a difference. Because once you understand that, you will never look at cucumber growing the same way again. And before we even touch the seeds, there is one preparation that many people completely ignore, yet it quietly decides whether the entire season becomes a success or a disappointment.
Most people believe cucumbers fail because of bad weather or poor seeds, but in my experience, the real problem begins much earlier.
I have watched neighbors plant into cold, heavy soil, pour strong fertilizer into the hole, water every day, and then wonder why the plants never become truly healthy. The funny thing is that everything they do looks like good care, yet every small mistake weakens the plant before it even has a chance to grow. Cucumbers do not need to be forced. They need to feel comfortable from the very beginning. One lesson stayed with me for years because an old gardener told me that the first roots decide the whole season. If those roots struggle during the first couple of weeks, the plant spends the rest of the summer trying to recover instead of producing fruit. That is why I never rush to plant just because the calendar says it is time. I always check the soil with my own hand. If it still feels cold a few inches below the surface, I wait. A few extra days of patience can save weeks of slow growth later. Another mistake I see almost everywhere is planting in ground that has been left untouched since last year. Hard soil keeps roots trapped, water stays where it should not, and air cannot reach the underground life that helps plants grow. Many years ago, I was shown a simple habit that costs nothing. Before planting, I loosen the soil deeply and mix in well-rotted compost or old organic matter instead of depending on expensive fertilizer. It does not look impressive, but it quietly feeds the soil instead of only feeding the plant for a few days. Healthy soil keeps working all season long. I also avoid fresh manure because it often creates fast leafy growth while reducing the harvest people are hoping for. Most gardeners never connect those two things. They see large green vines and think everything is perfect until flowering begins to slow down. By then, it is already too late to correct the mistake. The goal is not to grow the biggest leaves. The goal is to grow strong roots that can support healthy flowers and heavy cucumbers for months. There is one more simple preparation that many people skip because it seems too ordinary to matter. Yet I believe it has saved more cucumber plants in my garden than any product I have ever bought. It happens before the first seed even touches the soil, and once you understand why, you may never plant cucumbers the old way again.
Now let us talk about the seeds, because this is another place where people lose a big part of their harvest without even realizing it.
I used to open a packet, push the seeds into the ground, cover them with soil, and hope for the best. Sometimes they sprouted, sometimes they did not, and I blamed the weather every single time. Then an older gardener showed me something so simple that I almost laughed when I first saw it. He told me that healthy plants begin with healthy seeds that are given a gentle start instead of being thrown straight into cold soil. Since that day, I have never skipped this step. Before planting, I always inspect the seeds carefully and remove any that look damaged or unusually small. Good seeds usually reward you with stronger plants, and weak seeds often stay weak no matter how much care you give them later. After that, I soak the seeds in clean room temperature water for several hours. This simple habit wakes them up naturally and helps them begin growing more evenly. Many people spend money on expensive products that promise faster germination, but plain water has worked for gardeners much longer than those products have existed. After soaking, I place the seeds on a clean cloth for a short time until they are no longer dripping wet. I never leave them soaking for too long because they still need air as much as they need moisture. Another mistake I see every spring is planting seeds too deep. People think deeper planting protects the seed, but cucumbers do not like fighting through a thick layer of soil. I make a shallow hole, cover the seed lightly, and gently press the soil so it stays in contact without becoming hard. Then I water carefully instead of flooding the area. Too much water pushes air out of the soil, and young seeds need oxygen before they ever produce their first leaves. One more habit has become part of my routine over the years. After planting, I cover the soil with a thin layer of natural mulch, such as dry grass or old straw. It costs nothing if you already have it around the garden, but it keeps moisture in the ground, reduces sudden temperature changes, and slowly improves the soil as it breaks down. Most people ignore this because it does not look like a miracle solution, yet small, simple habits repeated every season often produce the biggest harvests. The funny thing is that after all these years, I have learned that growing cucumbers is not about doing many complicated things. It is about avoiding a handful of common mistakes that quietly steal your crop before summer has even truly begun. And once those first green shoots appear above the soil, another challenge begins, because this is where many healthy young cucumber plants suddenly stop growing for reasons that most gardeners never suspect.
When those first true leaves appear, many gardeners relax because they think the difficult part is over.
In my experience, that is exactly when the most expensive mistakes begin. Young cucumber plants may look healthy for a while, but if you care for them the wrong way during these first weeks, they will never reach their full potential. One mistake I see almost everywhere is watering a little every single day. It seems like kindness, but it teaches the roots to stay close to the surface where the soil dries out the fastest. Then, the first hot week arrives, the leaves begin to wilt, and people think the plants need even more water. In reality, they need deeper roots, not more frequent watering. I learned years ago to water less often but much more deeply. I want the moisture to travel well below the surface so the roots follow it downward. Strong roots create strong vines, and strong vines carry heavy crops without becoming exhausted halfway through the season. Another habit that changed everything for me was watering only around the base of the plant. I avoid wetting the leaves whenever possible because damp foliage invites diseases that spread surprisingly fast. Many gardeners spend money trying to cure those problems later, but preventing them costs nothing. Early in the morning is my favorite time because the plants have the entire day to use the moisture naturally. Around this time, I also place a thicker layer of straw or dry grass around every plant. Some people think mulch is only for keeping weeds away, but it does much more than that. It protects the soil from overheating, slows evaporation, keeps moisture more even, and gradually feeds the ground as it breaks down. Years ago, an older gardener told me that if you take care of the soil will take care of the plant. I did not fully understand those words back then, but today I see the truth in them every season. There is another small habit that very few people practice anymore. Every few days I simply walk through the garden and look closely at each cucumber plant. I do not rush. I check the leaves, the stems, and the growing tips. Small problems are easy to solve when they first appear, but after they spread across the whole plant, even expensive products may not help. Those quiet minutes in the garden often save an entire harvest. Soon, the vines begin to grow quickly, the first flowers appear, and this is the stage where one forgotten old method can dramatically increase the number of cucumbers you harvest without buying another fertilizer or chemical. But most people never even think about doing it.
This is the stage I always look forward to, because once the first flowers begin to open, I know the real season is finally starting.
Also where many gardeners accidentally reduce their own harvest without realizing it. They see beautiful yellow flowers covering the vines and assume every one of them will become a cucumber. A week later, most of those flowers are gone, and they start blaming the weather or poor seeds. The truth is usually much simpler. A cucumber plant can only keep producing if it has enough strength to feed every new flower and every growing fruit. That is why I never rush to pour strong fertilizer around the roots when flowering begins. Instead, I use an old method that was shown to me many years ago. I feed the soil with homemade compost tea or a mild natural infusion made from well-rotted compost. It costs almost nothing. It is gentle on the roots, and it encourages steady growth instead of a sudden burst that quickly fades away. I apply it every couple of weeks and let nature do the rest. Another habit I never ignore is harvesting cucumbers while they are still young and firm. Many people leave them on the vine because they hope they will become even bigger. What actually happens is that the plant begins putting all its energy into those older fruits instead of producing new flowers. The moment I see a cucumber reach a good eating size, I pick it. The plant quickly understands that its work is not finished and continues producing fresh flowers. It is one of the easiest ways to increase the total harvest without spending a single extra dollar. I also remove yellow leaves that are touching the ground because they no longer help the plant and can trap unnecessary moisture around the base. Healthy leaves higher on the vine receive more light and continue feeding the growing cucumbers. Every few days I gently guide the vines so they have enough space and fresh air moving between the leaves. Crowded vines stay damp much longer after rain or watering, and that creates conditions where problems appear much faster. Most people only notice those problems after the damage has already spread. I have learned that prevention is always easier than repair. Small, simple actions repeated throughout the season quietly build a stronger harvest than any expensive product sitting on a store shelf. Yet, there is still one final stage that decides whether your cucumber plants continue producing until the end of the season or suddenly stop much earlier than they should. And this last forgotten habit may be the one that surprises you the most.
By the middle of the season, many gardeners believe their work is almost finished.
They keep watering. They pick a few cucumbers now and then, and they expect the plants to continue producing on their own. That is usually the moment when the harvest begins to slow down. The vines look tired, fewer flowers appear, and the cucumbers become smaller than they were at the beginning of summer. I used to think that was simply the natural end of the season until an older gardener shared another forgotten habit with me. He said that cucumber plants are like hard-working people. If you never remove the extra burden, they become exhausted long before their time. Since then, I regularly walk through my cucumber bed and remove old yellow leaves, damaged stems, and fruits that have become too large or misshapen. Every one of those takes energy away from new growth. Once they are gone, the plant can focus on producing fresh flowers and healthy cucumbers again. I also pay close attention after heavy rain. Many people assume rain replaces watering, but too much water can wash nutrients deeper into the soil than young roots can easily reach. Instead of reaching for expensive fertilizers, I simply spread a thin layer of finished compost around the plants and let every watering slowly carry those natural nutrients into the ground. It is a gentle method that feeds both the soil and the roots without shocking the plant. Another lesson I learned is not to leave weeds growing close to cucumbers. Weeds do much more than spoil the appearance of the garden. They compete for moisture, sunlight, and nutrients every single day. Pulling them while they are still small saves much more work later and allows the cucumber vines to use every bit of the available resources. I also continue adding fresh mulch whenever the old layer begins to break down, because that simple cover keeps the soil cool during hot afternoons and helps moisture remain steady for much longer. These little habits seem almost too ordinary to matter, yet together they make an enormous difference over several months. Every season, I see the same pattern. Gardens that receive steady, simple care continue producing long after gardens that depend on expensive products have already slowed down. Healthy cucumber plants are rarely the result of one miracle trick. They are the result of many small decisions repeated with patience. There is still one final lesson I always remember before the season comes to an end, because it determines not only how much I harvest this year, but also how successful my garden will be when the next growing season begins.
When the season finally begins to slow down, many gardeners simply pull the cucumber plants out of the ground and forget everything that happened over the past few months.
I used to do exactly the same thing until I realized that every season leaves behind lessons that can make the next one even better. Now, I take a little time to look at each plant before removing it. I notice which vines stayed healthy the longest, where the strongest harvest came from, and which areas of the garden gave me the fewest problems. Those simple observations have taught me far more than any expensive gardening book ever could. I never think of gardening as a competition or a race to grow the biggest cucumber. For me, it has always been about growing healthy food with simple methods that anyone can follow. I like knowing that most of what helped my plants cost almost nothing. Good soil, patient watering, natural mulch, homemade compost, regular harvesting, and paying attention to small changes. None of these ideas are new. They were already known by gardeners many years before us, but somehow many people forgot them while searching for faster and more expensive solutions. Every summer reminds me that nature usually rewards patience more than shortcuts. A strong cucumber plant is not created in a single day. It becomes strong because every small decision supports the next one. Healthy soil supports healthy roots. Healthy roots feed healthy vines. Healthy vines produce flowers, and those flowers become crisp, fresh cucumbers that keep coming week after week. That is why I still enjoy walking through the garden every morning. It is not only about the harvest. It is about seeing the results of simple habits repeated with care. If you decide to follow these steps from preparing the soil all the way to the final harvest, I truly believe you will notice the difference. Your plants should stay healthier, your harvest should last longer, and you will probably spend much less money than before. Gardening has taught me that the simplest methods are often the ones that stand the test of time. I hope these old habits help you enjoy your own garden a little more this season. And if they do, stay with me, because next time I want to share another forgotten method that has helped me grow stronger vegetables while making the soil richer every single year without depending on expensive fertilizers or harsh chemicals.